It's Shootin the Bull, a podcast by Idaho Department of Fish and Game.
We're on. Yes.
And we're live. We're not live. So, what's wrong?
I just can't tell if I'm this pale or if it's the lighting in here, but I looked down at my arm. Sorry, continue.
Keep that on there.
Yeah.
I think it's the shirt.
It probably is.
We're all pale compared to him.
Bob. Mm-hmm. Okay. How do you say your last name?
Robatcek.
Robatcek.
Yep.
I was thinking Robatcek.
I know. That's what I was thinking too. It was like.
I wish that's what it is because that's what everyone thinks it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you've probably had a lot of that. I get Bieri.
Is it Polish?
Stuff like that.
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Robatski originally.
Really?
Slightly modified. Yeah.
Was it modified pre-America or
No,
before?
when they came over.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah,
We've had an Italian and now Polish.
Yeah. I'm hungry.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here, Sierra.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
We are here in the Magic Valley region
Yeah.
with Sierra Robatcek.
Yes.
I think I butchered that last syllable though.
Yes. I think you did too.
Say it one more time,
Okay.
Sierra.
Robatcek.
Robatcek.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was close.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be talking about big game migration today. It's gonna be a really cool one, really big topic. You're gonna hear it from the expert, not Bieri and I. So
we just asked the questions and maybe they're not informed questions, but whatever pops into our head.
yeah, whatever we're curious about.
Yeah.
Deer hatcheries, all that stuff.
I don't think you're prepared.
Part of it.
The look on her face was like, I am not prepared for the deer hatchery conversation.
Yep. Well, Sierra, welcome.
Thanks.
So what is your official title?
So I am a big game habitat and migration staff biologist, I think is the full title, but I normally just say habitat biologist.
Okay.
What is that in broad strokes? What does that mean?
Yeah, so I work under our habitat program with Sal Palazzolo and Jacob Gray. So they're my supervisors. We have a program made up of myself, those two that I just mentioned, Grace Bullington, who works for the Mule Deer Foundation, and us. So she's a co-op biologist. And then two farm bill biologists that are scattered throughout the state. And then Jesse Shallow also is one of our Mule Deer Foundation co-op bios. So we are basically tasked with working with regional habitat biologists and managers across the state to implement projects that are good for big game. So mostly focused in southern Idaho, but we do a little bit of work up in the Panhandle as well.
Okay.
When you say focused in southern Idaho, do you mean just the Magic Valley region or?
Across the board.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've got projects. Kind of we're involved scattered throughout the state, but some of our priority areas that we can talk about today, if you want, are focused on like mule deer over from Nampa, in the Oahes, up into the McCall-Weiser area, down into Soda Springs, Montpelier, up into Island Park. So it's really exciting because we get to work kind of everywhere across the state and even out of the state sometimes. I mean, we've worked with Utah before on some projects. Nevada, yep, Wyoming, Montana.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Has your job changed at all since you've started at Fish and Game, or has it always been this role?
Yeah, so my first job with Fish and Game was in 2014 as the technician out of the Upper Snake. That was back, we'll talk about that too, but that was back when we still had VHF collars. We hadn't done a ton of GPS. So VHF was a precursor to all the fancy technology we have now. And so I just followed mule deer around and documented, listened for beeps and did cause-specific mortality necropsies. And that was kind of the main point of my job over there. And then I got a grad position that was funded through Fish and Game looking at elk habitat use and nutrition and how that relates to pregnancy rates. And that was in several spots throughout Idaho. And then I was fortunate to get hired here at the Magic Valley as the population biologist alongside Jake Powell and Mike McDonald. So I did that for 5 or 6 years and then jumped into the habitat stuff in the last couple of years.
Okay. Prior to 2014, what led you to wanting to get into fish and wildlife? What did that look like?
Yeah.
And where did you migrate from?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good.
your own personal
I like
migration.
it. Yeah, my own personal migration. It's funny because my husband and I joke that every year in the spring we get kind of antsy because we spent so much time doing the seasonal tech work that it's like that was the time of year you're supposed to move and go somewhere else. But I grew up in Colorado, Western Colorado. I had an extremely fortunate childhood. Everywhere I lived was backed up to thousands, millions of acres of public land. One of my first memories was my 3rd birthday. We drug a mule deer doe out of a mud hole that she'd got herself down into and gotten stuck. So we just always had deer and pronghorn and elk. And
What was going through your
songbirds.
mind as a 3-year-old seeing that? Was it scary or was it like super cool?
I mean, I think I thought it was super cool. Now I'd feel really sorry for her. But at the time, like getting to, go up and touch this doe that hopefully made it, when we let her go, was really cool. And then, my dad's a hunter and he taught me how to bugle as much as you can teach a 5-year-old to bugle for elk. And so he'd
Really hitting those high notes.
Yeah. He'd take me down to the hay fields in the evening. And so I think I called my first silly little raghorn, in when I was 5 or 6 years old. And we'd do pack trips with my grandpa back into it was the Snowmass Maroon Bells wilderness where we would go in and it was just always part of my life. My great uncle and his son worked for Alaska Game and Fish for like 32 years. So I knew that it was a job option from the very beginning. And it's funny because my great uncle actually did his master's thesis on productivity of mule deer in what was the Idaho primitive area back in the early 60s, late 50s.
Wow.
And so they were looking at mule deer movement, back then. And so it's kind of like, it's cool. It's like full circle a little bit.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So you've known for a long time.
Yeah.
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 It's
I wanted to do the like veterinarian thing for a little while, but yeah.
Is that kind of a common path with
the
biologists? Yeah. Like in that field, like because being a veterinarian seems a little bit more approachable as a kid, not knowing like what a wildlife biologist would do. But like, does that seem kind of like the natural trajectory for folks that are interested in wildlife at a young age?
Yeah, I think it's cool. Like we've got biologists from all over the place, and it seems like that moment is like different for everyone, and that, I feel really fortunate. It was just what I just always got to be around wildlife. I think other people, like our program here where we work with kids in the schools, trout in the classroom, those kinds of things are so important because not everybody has that, family connection that their parents are taking them out. And so, I think some of them maybe had a different moment, but something just as, sparking that they want to get into wildlife. And, but yeah, the veterinarian thing, I think a lot of us are like, we just want to work with animals. I realized I'm really not very good at math. So, that's important for veterinarians that probably wasn't going to make it. But, yeah, I think it's a little different for everyone. We have people from all over the country. So.
Yeah, that's one of the things that struck me in my time working here has been just how diverse the people have been that have come here. We have a lot of people from back east, like Vermont, Maine,
New Jersey.
Yeah. Yep. There's some from the Dakotas that have done their schooling. What did the schooling look like for you, and how did you wind up as a biologist in Idaho?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad and my grad work at University of Idaho in Moscow. I ended up there. I wanted a small school. It was actually, like that or Wyoming or CSU in Colorado. And I just came up and visited Idaho. I swam for the first year in college, and so they had a wildlife program and a swim team. Yeah. But just really loved Idaho. Feel a little hypocritical, like I moved here, so I'm one of the people moving here, right? But Colorado, I hope Idaho doesn't quite get as chaotic.
Yeah, my father-in-law refers to Idaho as poor man's Colorado.
Okay, I haven't heard that one, but it's sort of, fitting, I guess. I look at land prices now, and I'm like, I can barely afford here now.
Yeah, that joke was probably better 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. But so came here, but, didn't necessarily settle in until I got my first job with Fish and Game. I did sage grouse work in Wyoming. I worked with bighorn sheep and black bears and songbirds in Colorado. And then I actually did a summer back in New York, looking at songbird populations too. So, but yeah, Idaho Fish and Game, we call it the Fish and Game family. And that really, I worked with different agencies. And in that time, like Fish and Game was just so welcoming and incredible to work with. And I still feel really fortunate.
And it seems like there's a really strong tie with the University of Idaho and Idaho Fish and Game too. A lot of our seasonals and our techs.
So that story is not unique.
No.
You hear about it a lot.
Yeah.
You meet a lot of folks that are alumni. That's interesting though. I didn't realize. So you bounce around, you kind of get a whole little smorgasbord of different wildlife is that after grad school or is that during?
So for me, that was during undergrad.
Okay.
So there's job boards out there. They can get pretty addicting to look at, and you can go anywhere in the world. The Texas A&M job board I spent hours and hours on it as an undergrad. And so, it's become really competitive. If I'd say to students who are in undergrad now, like do whatever you can to get the tech work in, because when you get out of that undergrad, if you're not ready to go to grad school yet, you need to have that as much experience as you can. And you don't really know what you want to work with till you've done it, and so even if you think you want to work with big game, like go work with waterfowl, go work with songbirds, amphibians.
Was there ever a point in your grad school tenure where you were kind of like, maybe I don't want to pursue this for an entire lifetime, or maybe you wanted to pursue another species, or was there ever any moments of trepidation like that?
Yeah, well, I definitely didn't want to be in grad school forever, and it did take a really long time. But I've never had any doubts about what it like continuing on. I actually just finished. I graduated grad school 7 years ago. I just got it published. So it's been
Nice.
a very long, drawn out process. And I think that's also not a unique story. Like a lot of people go through that.
Yeah. So how did you land on the specialization, I guess, of big game? Songbirds just were not.
They're not big enough.
Yeah, not big enough.
Honestly, I look at our non-game biologist and I think, man, Lynn's got such a great, all of them. Lynn is in our office here, but they've got such a great job. I also got to do, I worked on wolverines in Idaho. And I think that in if there was more jobs working with wolverines, I could have done that for the rest of my life. They're incredible. But, I'll work with anything and I'll do I didn't necessarily feel like I have to work with big game and migration. I really love it and I'm really glad to have the job I've got. But I don't think it was like self-inflicted niche.
Yeah, you didn't set out to be all things mule deer.
Yeah.
Did you pick mule deer because they're easier to find than wolverines?
They are a lot easier.
And a little bit nicer.
Yeah.
Yes, much easier to
They
catch.
don't bite as much.
No, not as bitey. Not at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's why I ended up in Habitat, honestly. So like Habitat, you get whatever you're doing is benefiting a lot of different species. We might be doing it for mule deer, but plant and sagebrush helps pygmy rabbits and sage grouse and brewer's sparrows and vesper sparrows and horned larks. And, so I think that's the cool thing about Habitat is it doesn't really matter what you're doing it for. You're having a bigger impact.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of caught up a little bit to how you got here, I guess speaking generally before we really get into what the work you're doing, a habitat, the thing that trips me up is staff biologist. Like we're all on staff, but is there any difference in the word staff? Is it useful or not?
I think what it's alluding to is like I can work across the state. So before I was a regional biologist, I was very focused on the Magic Valley region. I did have opportunity to go help in other regions, but like your main focus is what influences, hunters and hunting and big game populations in the Magic Valley. Now because I'm technically based out of headquarters, I can work across the state. And that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to provide support across the state.
So maybe that's a good internal delineation is regional versus staff.
Yeah.
Staff's everywhere. Regional is in that 1 of 7.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I didn't realize you were based out of headquarters.
I learned my first thing today.
Yeah.
Congrats, Ben.
Thank you.
The phrase "boots on the ground," how applicable is that to what you do?
Yeah. So, in my past life, I think I spent a lot more time in the field, and that's something that's just kind of come with the, like my day-to-day varies now a lot. But I do spend more time doing things like grant writing and GIS mapping, providing like technical support to biologists. But, there's no replacement for getting out and actually seeing the landscape you're trying to improve. And so in the summertime, I try to get out as much as possible with biologists that are planning those projects and actually seeing, where do we need to plant the sagebrush and the bitterbrush that's going to be the best for deer? Is this site conducive to it? Going out with BLM and Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, our federal partners, to do site inventory and look at, how treatments from the last year went. So we work with them to do a lot of cheatgrass spraying and shrub plantings and prescribed burns. And so following up on that, can't be very good at your job if you don't get out there and actually see it and experience that. So, I think that's extremely important. I try to still take advantage of the opportunity to fly. So I do still fly surveys and catch and collar animals. And there's no better way to see the habitat than from the air. So I try to take advantage of that whenever I can.
Do you fly yourself, or do you have a pilot that?
You would not want me as your pilot. No, it's funny. I don't think that I could ever fly a helicopter. I do not have the coordination. It's incredible. But we contract out with pilots. But the cool thing about Fish and Game is that we staff. We're one of the few states that still staff a helicopter to catch animals. Most other states contract that out because it is dangerous. And I think there's a lot of value in our biologists doing the work, actually putting hands on the animals and being the ones taking the data. So that's pretty cool that we still do that.
So I guess maybe 2 parts, because your job has changed over the years, but what does a typical day look like for you early on when you first started, and then kind of more so now in the modern?
Yeah, the regional versus the staff even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's a good question. So as a regional biologist, I feel like I'd walk in and any day I just didn't really know what was going to be happening. Like you'd have a moose and Haley that needs started and moved, or, you'd be in the thick of season setting and you'd need to scramble and pull some data together for headquarters or for a public request or whatever it might be. And so all of that was really important, but it was really hard to focus on one project and run it down because you're getting pulled a lot of different ways. As the staff biologist, I don't have all of those obligations as much anymore. And so I'm able to really pick priority projects with the, guidance of my supervisors and see them through, which has been really cool. And a lot of the projects we're working on are super long term. It's going to be years in the making. But, if you don't have a few people that are able to just dedicate time to those things, they don't always happen.
Yeah.
So
how do you go about with your supervisors picking some of the projects? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, Sal and Jacob have been in the job a lot longer than I have. And so they are really guiding this program through. And I've talked about Grace. Grace is our MDF biologist. So I think a lot goes into that, but we do have our priority areas that we work in. We rely on our statewide action plan, and our big game management plans to guide some of that work. We look for ways to take advantage of an opportunity that arises too. So, I'll just pick a low-hanging fruit one, fencing. We'll talk about fencing. Fencing's a big barrier on migration routes. We'll if the opportunity comes about to replace fencing in a migration corridor, like we're ready for that, and we'll make that happen. But some of these bigger long-term plans, now that we've got these migration routes mapped, we've got seasonal ranges mapped, or in the process of getting there, we know where work should be happening. So, then it's just determining like, how do you get the money? How do you get the support for it? What do you need to do to, say there's a conservation easement you want to go after, which is totally voluntary on the part of the landowner, right? But you need to start like building those relationships, and that can take a really long time. So those are the types of things that we're kind of always have in the back of our mind, is like, what can we do now that will make sure this migration and this population are still going in 50, 60, 100 years?
That's part of the perpetuity in our call to action as employees of Idaho Fish and Game.
Really quick, before we start diving into some of these specifics, what is the main goal, or why do we care where mule deer or big game are traveling, where coming from? Why does it matter? Why does it matter to sportsmen? Why does it matter to us? What is kind of the main bigger picture here?
Yeah. So, mule deer, elk, pronghorn, they have these changing needs throughout their entire year. And a lot of our herds in southern Idaho, for survival, need to be able to migrate. Our winter ranges down here are in pretty rough shape with all the fires and stuff. But even before that, the Snake River Plain doesn't offer a whole lot in terms of summer nutrition and forage. So while it's really good for winter because they get out of deep snows, it's not real good the rest of the year. So they migrate up into these high mountain valleys and ranges to capitalize on the forage. So all three of those species, all of our big game, really rely on nutrition and fat reserves to get through the year. And body condition, just much like with people, if you're healthy, then your whole year is going to go better, right? You start to get unhealthy and things like illness and disease and stuff will start to take a toll. So having good quality habitat and being able to access that is extremely important. And really, we can talk about predation and hunting pressures and that kind of thing, and hard winters and all of those things do have an impact on populations, and in some places significant ones. But really the main long-term driver of all our big game populations is habitat. And so we have to ensure that these migration routes stay open so that these animals can access what they need in the winter and what they need in the summer. And so, migration routes are getting a lot of attention, which is great and really important, but we can't ignore the summer and the winter component either. It all goes together.
The pursuit of food.
Yeah.
I think
Can
that's
relate.
Yeah, we all can. We can all relate to
and
what these animals are going through.
And to your question about the hunters, I think hunters have hunters fund conservation in Idaho. Like we're using their money and we're using federal money to do all of these projects. And we use that money too to monitor populations. So all of that data complements each other. We know that, we know how many deer relatively are in most places throughout the state. We now know kind of where they're moving to. We can start to tease out like, well, why are these fawn doe ratios so low? Why are these fawns so little when we catch them? Is it a winter range problem? Is it a summer range problem? Is it something else entirely? And so, I think hunters too, it's cool to me to think about migration because people have been following animals for thousands and thousands of years and mostly in the name of hunting.
Yeah.
So like
food.
Right. Food, the pursuit of food.
We have a title for the podcast.
Pursuit of food.
Yeah. So, the first people that crossed the Bering Land Bridge or kayak down the coast, they were following their food source. And so a lot of what we're doing now, putting these GPS collars on, what's really neat is if you go out there and you walk one of these migration routes that have been mapped, there's places where you find shards and arrowheads, it's littered. The path of the pronghorn up there north of the Craters of the Moon National Park. there's a real bottleneck there that honestly, I don't know why it's there. You'd think like, oh, Highway 20. Well, that was in way after, these pronghorn hit a path and they walk it single file. And there are rock cairn blinds, there's arrowheads. Like, people have known about that for so long. So when we rediscovered it with GPS collars, it's like, I don't know, it kind of gives you the shivers. Like,
totally.
people have known. Yeah.
It's right up your alley.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that something that happens quite a bit in your guys' research? Finding like not remains, but like finding artifacts of the past with some of these kind of tried and true natural migration paths?
I think it is. Like, I think, and tribal knowledge and archaeologists and stuff would probably be able to speak to it far more than me. But I think there was a study that came out of Wyoming where archaeologists were actually looking at mapped migrations to then go and look for evidence of human civilization. Wow. So like the reverse a little bit, and they were finding it like it's, people knew, and the Plains tribes following the bison. There's this map out there that shows like a like theoretical migration route of bison. And it's theoretical because the bison are gone, right? And the landscape's changed a lot. So they were looking at like human presence on the landscape to determine where they thought bison moved. So just the relatedness there between like hunters, animal behavior, movements is really cool.
How much in what you found, how much human presence determines whether a path changes or not? Because like I'm looking at a map right now of the Magic Valley region and I can see like 50 different town names, not to mention highways and roads and things like that have been here in the last 100 years, but yet there's still natural paths that the animals are still following?
Yeah, that's a good question, Connor. Like, I wonder how much of these are the exact same and how much of them are like a shadow of what they were or just changed. Yeah. When you go through like the Bennett Hills, which are pretty for the most part, pretty other than, some fences. Yeah. They're pretty untrammeled. Like you'll find shards and it looks like they've been traveling these paths for a long time. You look at what we call our Awinza pronghorn and migration route, which those animals summer again up in the Soldiers and the Pioneers, and then they cross 5 different highways. Who knows how many fences? I don't know. Railroad, the canal system, just ag development. And then they get stopped on the interstate right out here between Twin Falls and Eden. And so that migration is like, I think about what you just asked is like, is that the same? I mean, they are so resilient and they're like fighting all of these barriers to get there. They're still doing it.
We keep putting up more barriers.
Yeah,
we do. And it's like, we put up, highways or roads or whatever, houses, but then they still have the same natural barriers too, like those pinch points and, the Bennett Hills and things that naturally funnel them, rivers. So it's like, I wonder how much they still instinctively follow those paths, even though there's a subdivision that they have to cross through,
It sounds like a nature-nurture argument. I asked this of somebody yesterday at work. I said, what do you think it is? Is it nature or nurture? And it's just, I don't know that we can answer that question because at some point. Let's get a
beer in here.
At some point, yes, that'll be the next one. We're going to ask. Terry, Terry, can you line up a mule deer for questioning? Just like at some point, that first one had to make the journey there and back. And then all the friends came and the family came and all that other stuff, right? Like,
and then they moved out.
I'm giving human, I'm giving human characteristics to animals, but like, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Like, and at some level, I don't know that we can understand it. But I mean, that's what you guys are working hard to do is like to figure out just like, what's going on here?
Yeah. What happens sometimes when they get to the interstates? Do we have to work with like Idaho State Troopers or Sheriff's Office to close down?
It
those
seems
roads?
like one of the things I was thinking about coming into this too was there's a lot of viral videos out there right now of these migrations, whether it's giant herds of elk, pronghorn. I think there's maybe more awareness out there. But yeah, how do like Do we call a conservation officer and say we need to stop traffic? What does all that look like?
Yeah. So we have enlisted the help of state troopers and our conservation officers when it's a public safety concern, which it definitely is when you get a moose, or an elk on the highway.
Herds of moose?
Yeah. In some places.
Yeah.
Terry has dealt with that
What?
often. He always gets the...
We have so much to talk to this Terry fellow about.
I'll have to follow him later.
Yeah, maybe we'll follow him.
He could probably tell some stories about, that kind of thing. But, signs, well, we put up signs in some places. So especially in the wintertime, we get, and in hard winters, you can get animals almost gravitating to roadways because they're plowed and they're getting out of the deep snow. So there's a whole long roadway interactions with wildlife is I don't know if I'd say it's recently emerging still, but kind of fairly emerging study where it's, roadway ecology is now a field of study. And there's people working on that.
Like a field in grad school or a research field?
Research. And then just figuring out like how can we mitigate these, and so you've seen like a surge in highway crossings across the United States, especially in the Western US where we still have these big migrations happening. Idaho Transportation Department is our biggest partner. I mean, they are the ones that are in charge of managing our roadways right. And so we can't do anything without them. And they've been a really good partner for us. They just completed the Highway 21 overpass that's getting used, which is so great to see.
5 stars.
5 stars.
Yeah.
Google reviews.
They love it.
They do love it.
Yep. And they've got more in the works that are coming. And they've done some, Highway 20 as you drive between Timmerman Junction and Mountain Home. They have replaced some culverts with free-span bridges, and we're seeing use. Those aren't fenced, so fencing is a critical component, unfortunately, of most crossings to funnel animals to them. But even without the fencing, we're seeing deer and elk going under and using those instead of across. Pronghorn are a problem. Pronghorn won't go under, so they need the overpass.
Some sort of intervention.
Yeah.
So pronghorn won't jump.
A strong
They
top
won't
one. They're a problem. That's what I'm hearing. Stubborn animals.
What is, I guess, the single biggest hindrance or obstacle for a migrating deer or elk?
Yeah, it probably varies. I mean, it'll vary from place to place. Now that we've got ours mapped, I can probably speak to specifics on a few of the different, herds that we have mapped out and followed. Real quick, back to your point earlier, Ben, about like nurture versus nature. So there has been some work done on it, and it's interesting. So for like birds, it's an instinct. They don't have to learn it. They just know they've got the instinct to migrate. For big game, it appears to be learned. So you guys could get Holly Miyazaki on one of these because she was an author on an article published in Science with a bunch of different researchers that pretty much determined that big game, it has to be learned. So if you lose that knowledge within the population, that can sever that migration route. So we've seen, we had a really hard winter a couple years ago, and Wyoming did too. And so a huge part of a mule deer cohort and a large part of pronghorn population died that winter. And so they saw less. The concern was, are these pronghorn going to make it from, I think it was the Red Desert back up at the Summer Range into Jackson? Because if they lose all of them, like, how is that going to come back? So luckily, they still had some that would make the route, but they're going to have to rebuild that knowledge, is the thought that, these are fragile. And if we do enough to obstruct the migration, whether it's like a physical barrier or the knowledge goes away, you can lose them.
Have there been studies where that instinctual path was fractured and animals had to either relearn it or they established another path?
Yeah, so now we're getting beyond I'm afraid I don't know for sure.
That's okay.
I think
She's a staff biologist.
there are some examples, though in our state that we do know of that migrations have essentially been either severely altered or ended. And I don't know if I want to use the term ended as a hard and fast, because I do think we don't give it enough credit. Tapered. So I'm looking at the map here, and we've got the sublets and black pine down in the southern, right on the Utah border. So if you drive the interstate from, Burley down to Salt Lake, what's that, I-86?
Yeah.
That interstate went in, I think, in the late 60s.
Why'd you look at Terry?
Yeah, Terry's nodding. He's nodding, though.
Sorry. The elderly wisdom in the room. And so
It's getting worse.
Terry's like, oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah. I was there.
Yeah.
Kid.
you were in Alaska.
Drove
Drove my Chevy Nomad across
Not
it.
yet.
We'll cut all that out.
I don't know. Sorry. So when that went in, those deer used to winter on black pine, summer in the sublets, and they had huge amounts of deer got hit on the interstate. They put the fences up to keep them off the interstate. And we have since collared deer in those two units over the last 10 years, and you still see the collar data come to the interstate and then stop. And then they hit the fence and they follow it down all the way into Utah.
Oh.
We've had, I think, 2 does that we've collared have found a box culvert. I think it's at Meadow Creek, and they've gone under and seemingly still made this migration. So whether or not it can be reconnected, I don't know. Another example is over there at Shotgun Valley with pronghorn herd over along I-15. They probably moved back and forth beforehand, and looking at, you drive by there, you see pronghorn kind of piling up on the fence. So, there is still, I think maybe you could reconnect, but I don't know that there's an example of that being done.
Yeah.
So really quick, Sierra, we're talking a lot about how we track big game. What time of year are we doing this research, and how are we doing it? Or not we, but I guess you guys, how are staff going out and gathering this information?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we catch a lot of animals across the state. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, and it kind of depends on the species and where at in the state you are. But most of it's helicopter capture. So, for mule deer and pronghorn, we use the helicopter, we net gun them.
Okay. What does that look like or mean?
Yeah. So, it's essentially a rifle with 4 chambers that hold weights in, and a big net that's attached to those 4 weights that shoots a .308 round. And so when that goes off, it shoots the canister with the net and those 4 weights out and over the animal. It takes a lot of skill to do that. We only have a couple of guys in the office in the department that do it. And you have to be really careful how you do it, when and where, and how fast the animal is running, and the terrain, so that you don't hurt them.
Are they also does it translate? Are they good bird hunters? Skeet shooters?
I bet that they are. Yes, I would say.
Safe assumption.
Do they walk
I
around?
won't insult any of them on here. I think they're all probably pretty good shots all the way around.
Do they walk around being like, I shot that mule deer?
Yeah, I think it's one of our gunners tapes his wrist now. He's getting I think arthritis from the years of doing it. It's a heavy gun. By the time you're hanging out of the helicopter, you get all that recoil. It's normally really cold because we're doing it normally in the winter. So to your question about when we do it, normally it's wintertime. Okay. Pronghorn survive better, actually, if you do it in the summer. And they tend to overheat. So pronghorn have that really extra hollow hair that keeps them really, really warm in the winter. So if you run them for too long, they get really hot. And so we do it in the summer. we try to never run them for very long. And then we also will use drugs sometimes so you can dart. We try to do that for elk, just because an elk is so big. Moose, we dart. Again, out of the helicopter. We've drop netted before, which is basically just this big net that you set up that has an electrical current running through it. You bait underneath, and then you can cut the electric, and the net drops down on the deer or the, whatever you're trying to catch. There's clover trapping. So again, you bait. They're like these little... They almost look like have a heart for an ungulate, I guess.
Holy cow, that's
they're
gotta be
like
big.
great big. There's not a pan. That might be a bad example, but the trigger and the door slides down behind them, and then you can like either just get in there with them, which is tough, or you can like fold it up and lay them down on their side. I don't know who the first person was to do the helicopter capture thing. I think Colorado was the first state to maybe try it, and they would run elk into snow drifts and then just jump on them. So we've come a little bit further than that. But as far as the question to like technology increasing for capture, there's been some creative stuff tried with, I think, again, it was Colorado. I can't remember who it was, but they were baiting deer in, and there was like a collar hanging on a frame, and the animal would step onto a weight scale, and it would put its head through the collar, and then it would tighten down to the right size.
Wow.
There was a lot. So they involved like an engineering team on this.
Like a Rube Goldberg experiment.
Everything has to go right to get this collar on this deer.
We have not adopted that. I don't know if it succeeded or not.
I feel like teenagers would end up in it. Like, this is just what's going to happen.
A dog.
Yeah.
So, the technology has gotten smaller and smaller. One of the cool things, hopefully, we'll be able to try. We've tried it a little bit with mixed success, is solar ear tags. So instead of having to put a collar on an animal, you can put an ear tag in it. It still transmits to like cell phone towers, or to, I think there's some that can do satellites now. So you get away from having this thing around an animal's neck, which is really nice, especially for like mule deer bucks, where you can't really put, they swell up so much during the rut. So bucks have been hard for us to like keep a collar on long term. And then just having something around their neck, it would be nice to get away from that.
How big are the ear tags?
So they're about the size of like a cattle ear tag.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you held up your hand like everybody could see.
Oh, I did a hand gesture.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm doing that too over here.
It's about this big.
Yeah. They're a little heavy. Like a pronghorn is about, pronghorn have kind of like dainty little ears, and I think New Mexico and Texas have been putting them in, and they've been okay. But
it's not like fisheries where they can put a tag, like a pit tag in.
No.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we'll get there. Yeah. I think that maybe someday we will.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure I don't even want to go into it. I'm not smart enough.
We used
Ben's
to do,
on the case.
Yeah. Here we go.
So he's doing the research.
We used to do drive nets. We still do drive nets for deer, I'm thinking. We used to do drive nets for elk, and it was, I don't need to ever do a drive net for elk ever again.
What is that like?
But that's, again, you're using a helicopter, but you got a bunch of people on the ground, and you set up these nets it's kind of hard to describe, like these big, tall, like 8-foot nets that you pick a spot that kind of naturally funnels deer so that when they come down, they don't see the nets all up, but you just basically chase them into these nets. It's like misnetting deer. Like instead of birds, it's misnetting deer. Yeah.
God, hold on for dear life.
Don't.
No, it's got to be tough to hold that net.
Oh, yeah.
Have you guys gone out on one of them before? You need to.
I've had one chance, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah. I thought I was telling you don't with the deer jokes.
Oh, I'm not. I'm saving those for later off air. Dang. Okay, so those are the many options and the many tools that you guys have. Is it safe to say, you did say that like it depends on the area, but is it safe to say that like net gunning or drive nets are probably the most common?
Yes, definitely. Okay. Yeah.
So then what does that process look like then with, they call it deer mugging? Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that the official term?
Yeah.
What does that process look like from then on out? Like now the animal's in the net or on the ground, or a biologist is on top of it, whatever. How do we get the collars or the ear tags on and then move from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So once the animal's in the net, a mugger gets out of the helicopter and gets the animal hobbled, hobbles their legs, gets them out of the net, gets a blindfold on them. You try to keep stress to a minimum because this is a really terrifying experience, I'm sure, for them. So try to work quickly. Once you get them out of the net, you put the collar on, put the ear tags in. We can take all kinds of different data depending on the purpose of the study. We always take a measurement around their chest girth, and then hind foot length. Those two measurements can relate to like body condition and growth. Okay. So that's kind of why we do that. We do have some staff on hand that are trained on using the ultrasound. So sometimes for like adult cows, cow elk or doe mule deer, they'll do body condition scoring that way. So they can actually measure rump fat in millimeters. So that's the most accurate way to take body condition on a live animal. So sometimes they get out of the helicopter and we'll do that. For bighorn sheep, there's a whole suite. We tend not to even process sheep on the hillside anymore, I don't think. So then you get into like slinging animals. So there's a bag that you put them in, attach them. Yep.
Speaking of virality, you see a lot of those videos going around through a lot of the Western Fish and Wildlife agencies.
Yep.
What is it called?
Slinging. Okay. You're slinging animals. So
slinging sheep.
Yeah. And we'll do it with deer. Anytime there's like a need to take a lot of extra data for whatever the study is, they get slung back to a central processing station. And like in the case of sheep, we're taking a bunch of disease-related information down.
Okay.
So big picture, what's the data for? We're just coming off season setting. Mm-hmm. How does it all fit? And for the lay person that's listening, for the hunter that's looking for more information, what's it all for? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we try to squeeze as much as we possibly can out of one collared animal. Any of these collars the data can be used for so much, right? When we first started collaring animals, a lot of it, some of the studies were to see where they were going, and that was it. You were just following the animal as collar and faller is what we called it. And so from my for our program, for the program I work under, we really want to see where animals are spending the most time and the really important places from a habitat perspective. Like, it doesn't matter why the animal was collared. If we see where it goes, that's super valuable because now we can go and do work with the NRCS and the private landowner if they want to convert fences to wildlife friendly. We can work with the Forest Service on a prescribed burn if we see that this doe is fawning in habitat that could use some disturbance. We can work with the BLM on a cheatgrass treatment if we see that animals are spending a bunch of time on a place that's been burned and is fully invaded. So that's the value that we get out of a lot of out of all of our collars, because they all tell you where they go. There's other research going on that's looking at survival. So we've had this very long-term research going on that looks at mule deer fawn survival and calf elk survival. So those collars, all of them really are programmed to go on a mortality signal after 4 hours. So if the animal hasn't moved for 4 hours, it sends an alert to a computer. And then biologists go out as soon as possible, document what killed it. So it could be a mountain lion, it could be malnutrition, it could have gotten hung up in a fence, hit on a road, whatever the cause of mortality is. And that's really important too. We get a lot of concerned constituents that are worried about the effects of predation on our big game populations. And in some areas that really is an issue. In other places, it's really not that much. And so being able to disentangle, like, what is our limiting factor on our populations? Is it predation? Is it habitat? Are we losing more fawns to lions, or are we losing more fawns to malnutrition? Mm. And so those collars are allowing us to get at that as well.
That's a lot of That's a huge answer for like, what does it do?
Yeah.
A lot.
It opens a lot of doors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't want to forget too. So if our technical assistance manager was here, he would have jumped in already. But the value of having some of this data, regardless of what it is, but really that just the map to where they go has been really, really valuable. So we've got, and I'd also like to, acknowledge like Scott Bergen and the folks that are doing most of this mapping effort, because it's not an easy task. There's like a lot of work that goes into it. It's not as simple as like throwing dots on the map. Like they're doing a lot. The value of having data before a project gets proposed is like indescribable, almost like how valuable that is, because so many times, you're faced with like a proponent comes, they want you to comment on the project that they want to put in. And if all you have is like anecdotal data or like, well, we know that mule deer use it, or we know there's elk there, you can throw that in. But if you have a map that says over the last 3 to 5 to 7 years, we've documented these movements. We think that this much of the population does it. We've identified these really important places. That collar data can be used to guide those projects.
Wow.
So it helps us work with animals, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I assume because animals don't know the difference between Region 4 and Region 5 and even Idaho and Nevada, we're working with other agencies, other regions you guys are probably working with too, because I guess, before we answer that, how far are some of these migration routes or paths? And are we talking like 10, 15 miles or longer than that? And are they crossing multiple mountain ranges or multiple deserts? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It kind of spans the gamut, I think. Okay. So we do have some herds that are making shorter movements, 20 miles, 15 miles. We have residents too, and that's good data. Like
town deer.
Yeah, town deer.
They don't leave.
Wood River Valley elk. Yeah. We certainly have some of that going on. But then we have others that are going 120, 140, 150 miles. Wyoming documented the mule deer 255 that I think hers was over 200 miles, and she ended up in Idaho, all the way, went through Yellowstone and ended up summering in Island Park. So to your point, Connor, about working with different agencies, I can't stress the importance of the federal partners. I mean, we might manage the wildlife, but they manage 99% of the land that they're on, and private landowners manage the rest. I mean, it's a collaborative effort across everybody, and also, while we bring some money to the table for these projects, for sure, large amounts, again, mostly funded by hunters. The federal funding is what has allowed us to do a lot of the work. And so without good relationships with those federal partners, they could put their money anywhere that they think is important. And they have a multi-use mandate. Like they've got a lot, like we get to focus on the wildlife. And so getting to work with them to guide where those dollars go is really important, and definitely makes it to where, you might be talking about one habitat project, but you're in a room with the NRCS and the private landowner and the BLM and the Forest Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service and the local land trust and the county and the Soil Conservation District. So it's a lot of people to work with. It becomes more of a people management thing than anything.
Going back to the theme of nature versus nurture, you brought up a good point, because I hadn't thought about resident critters. But first question is, do we track? Obviously, we know that those animals are lingering around in places like that or don't move. Are we tracking those animals and following their path, and they just get to, say, the Wood River Valley and stop? They're like, oh, this is a nice little community.
Good enough.
Yeah, cool music scene here. I'll chill.
I'd stop there.
And do they just? Is it kind of like end of the line for them, and then they end up passing that on down to their offspring? Or is it those populations thrive there and they reproduce there and stay there, whereas other populations are kind of just moseying right through?
Yeah.
Is there any really rhyme or reason for that? Or is it just they learned it and they're going to keep doing it?
That's where I wish you could go catch the deer to ask them. I think it's there's a lot to think about there too, Connor. Like, I think in some of these cases, to Terry's point, some of the residency has been human induced. Like, there are reasons now that elk would stay in a spot, or any of them would stay in a place that they wouldn't have before. I mean, the snow gets super deep in the Wood River Valley. Like, undoubtedly, we have, I mean, the Wood River Valley is a unique example and maybe not a perfect one for the bigger conversation, but, you know, there's a lot of wintering animals on those, especially like south-facing slopes above town and stuff. But did we have, 500 elk wintering in the valley? I don't know. I mean, I think that we have lost our knowledge of what animals used to do compared to what they do now, but you can't deny that like feeding animals will definitely hold them places that they wouldn't have otherwise. So
has an impact greater than just nice pictures in your backyard.
Yeah, exactly. So that's some of it. I think some of them, I mean, we could get down the whole density dependence and like what the range can support and that kind of thing. Like some of these ranges can support a resident population at large numbers for an entire year. And there's research out there that has shown the trade-offs between migration and being a resident. And most of the literature I've seen, and again, like I'm sure there's new stuff out there that I'm not up to speed with, has shown that migration confers certain benefits and that survival is typically higher, reproductive output is typically higher, their body condition is higher than a resident of that same area.
So the migratory animals look down upon the residents.
Yes. Yeah. And it's funny because we also, when you collar an animal and they just stay in that spot, you're like, didn't do anything cool, but it's like, well, yeah, we shouldn't forget about the residents and like our, front country populations that aren't making these huge migrations. Like they're all part of the puzzle and the community structure. So,
which streets do they use to go down to the river and commute?
Yeah.
Do you guys see, real quick, do you see resident populations even around here in Twin Falls, Jerome area? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we do.
Yep. I think there's some number of resident deer probably everywhere. Pocatello's got it. Boise, we've got deer out here between, so in the wintertime, we don't exactly know how many deer out here outside of our Twin Falls office, but we've done 2 years worth of just surveying. Like there's a strip of BLM ground out there that has 1,500 deer standing in it in January. You go out there in August and I bet you could find a deer or two, but there's not near as many. So, there are some residents, but the majority of our southern Idaho populations are migratory.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about, we've talked a lot about how they move, the data we're able to pull out. How does Idaho Fish and Game, I guess, at what point do we get involved when we determine that there's a problem? I don't know if that's the best word. Situation, circumstance. How do we get involved? And you alluded to this a little bit, like with ITD. What are some of the things that we do collectively, to aid in the migration? We've talked about the overpasses, the animal overpasses. You had mentioned the animal safe fence. Mm-hmm. What is that?
Yeah. So fencing is one of our easiest instant gratification habitat projects that I feel like we can almost do. So fences can be very detrimental to wildlife. We recognize that, livestock producers, fences are necessary. They're going to be on the landscape, but there's ways, in many situations to work with private landowners or the forest BLM, again, all those same players, to do wildlife friendly fence, which just has different specifications on it. So the main ones being that it's no taller than 42 inches and the bottom wire is 18 inches off of the ground and smooth wire so that they don't cut themselves up. So we've done a lot of that. Most of that has been on. So a lot of these federal agencies have just taken it upon, like if a fence burns down, it gets rebuilt as wildlife friendly when it can. And across southern Idaho, a lot of fences have burned. So we've gotten a lot, of wildlife friendly fence rebuilt. Private landowners, it's very expensive to rebuild or even to retrofit a fence. Like $18,000 a mile. So the only way we're really getting that done is with the help of, in many situations, the help of the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And they offer cost share programs to landowners, and they have to meet certain criteria to be eligible. We don't need to get into that, but we will work with the NRCS to tell them, like, yeah, this is an important spot because it falls in a mapped migration route or it's on winter range, to help prioritize, because obviously the funding is limited still, even with it being federal. And so we're trying to, instead of shotgunning projects all over the landscape, we're trying to really start to build projects on top of each other to make a bigger impact.
Using the data that you collect.
Yeah, using the data.
All of the ways that you described.
And I think we probably have projects going in every mapped migration route. Even if we're not directly the driver behind it, again, we share this data with our partners and they're using it. So even if that is the contribution we have to the project, it's still getting out. I guess what I'm saying is I think there's probably some sort of habitat project happening in every single one of our map migrations right now, which we've mapped a bunch. I wish I knew that. It's like, I can't remember the number. We have more than any other Western state right now, I think, mapped of migration routes. So that's a lot. It spans the gamut, the habitat projects that are being done, which is cool.
What are some of the upper, you said like 20 to 50 miles is kind of on the shorter end. What are some of the longer measures?
So I think we've got some deer that are, this is where I wish Scott was here, like 120 miles. I'm more familiar with our Magic Valley migrations for sure, but we've got, so our deer outside of Eden and Twin Falls here, they're traveling clear up into the Soldiers, and one of them even, like, her collar shut off, but she was past Loman, which I don't think is like a normal one. Like, I don't think they're all doing that, but you'll get animals that just take off. We had a collared elk that ended up over in Jackson Hole that was collared right at Mountain Home, I believe, Teapot Dome. It took her a couple of years to get over there, but it was like she stuck her nose up each of the mountain valleys on the way, the Lost River and the Passamaroy, or I guess the Lost River and the Lemhi, and then ended up on the Jackson Hole elk, the National Elk Refuge over there.
Whoa. The Loman one, was it like a mort signal, or did it just fall off?
Nope, it fell off. It wasn't supposed to fall off. It was just a malfunction on the collar mechanism. But yeah, it fell off. It was like May 5th. So, she's getting ready. If she was pregnant, she was getting ready to have a fawn. She probably still had a little ways to go before she was going to stop for the summer. So, and again, they're like learned migrations, and deer have a pretty high fidelity to their routes, and a doe will have a fawn in the same exact aspen patch, from year to year. So presumably she had made that movement before. It was not a one-time thing, but who knows?
Wow.
Yeah,
who knows?
That's insane, man. Jesus.
Yeah,
thinking about
we've even got migratory. we just published our first moose migration. So over there on the Sand Creek Desert, we'd collared some moose, and Tim Swearingen would know more about what they're doing, the habitat biologist over there, but they're making a migration movement.
Every time I hear about a moose in the Magic Valley that's down closer to Twin Falls, it blows my mind.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand particularly how if they're in city like of Twin Falls, how they have to be coming up from the south, right? They're not necessarily crossing north to south.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe if I just keep talking, I'll figure it out.
No, they are crazy. And it's interesting, you look at the collar data now and like we were talking about earlier, what did it used to look like? These deer pile up on the interstate right here. We've had one that made it across the interstate and ended up in the South Hills. It was a buck fawn. So bucks, kind of do a little bit different of a deal. Whenever one really goes, sometimes you're like, was it a buck fawn when we collared him? Like they do travel around, but, the interconnectedness, and you see it in like these populations for the hunter looking at our management, books, like wondering how did we delineate, like why do we have the Smoky Boise mule deer data analysis unit? Like what is that? Like that was, I wasn't on that plan. There were a lot of things that went into that, but collar data played heavily in, and it was like we couldn't find a break. Like where deer in Unit 50 were summering with deer in GMU 49, and deer in GMU 49 were coming down and wintering with deer from Unit 39 in Unit 45. And so to try to capture and manage these populations appropriately with tags and season timing, we're trying to do it on this population level, and it gets really hard because it's like, well, deer can move, which is really cool about Idaho, right? Like we still have the open spaces that make that job hard, and we're really fortunate. But it was like, where do you draw the line? They're all mixing. So.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying about that example in the pasture where there's one or two deer in August, but then 1,500 in the wintertime. That's a good point that I don't know if folks really consider when if you're a hunter, like you're used to seeing animals in a certain window of time in the year. You might be out there, scouting in the summer, or you might be out bear hunting or turkey hunting or whatever in the spring. But typically, at least in my experience, you only see the deer or the elk in that one time that you're hunting.
Yeah.
You might see them here and there drifting through in the summer, but those animals are moving kind of when you're not, and that's something that I think is a really, really hard task for wildlife managers and biologists too, to consider if when you're drawing those lines and you're coming up with rules and regulations that these animals are not stagnant. They're not hanging out in the Boise River Valley or Wood River Valley or whatever year round. They're moving around. And that's a really good point that I'm glad you brought up. Do we see that elsewhere too with other animals, or mostly is it just mule deer and elk?
Pronghorn for sure. Pronghorn are probably our most nomadic. They almost go beyond like migratory, and they're like what we call nomadic. So the pronghorn they go until they run out of snow. And so, a lot of times when you hear about these, some people may have read about, in these really hard winters and like fence lines it's the same thing you see out on the plains, where you get livestock. Ranchers are losing a lot of cattle. They pile up on fences. Pronghorn do the same thing. Like they'll just travel and travel. We had an instance in I think it was the 2016-17 winter where some pronghorn on the big desert, so out there north of American Falls, crossed the reservoir. And that was, probably to just get out of the snow. They just, before all of this human infrastructure, who knows how far pronghorn would go in really hard winters. So they're hard, along with everything else that make pronghorn hard. They don't navigate a lot of these barriers as well as the other ones do. And they're almost, I don't know if I want to say like more susceptible, but like a hard winter can really do pronghorn in. And mule deer, mule deer hard winters are the driver on short-term mule deer population reductions because the fawns just don't survive a hard winter very well. And even the older bucks, they get hit really hard. So, that's another component of why these open landscapes are so important, is giving animals the option to get out. They're not like us. They don't have the house to go in and warm up in. They like what they've got is on the landscape is what keeps them alive. And so being able to access those resources through variability in winter weather is really important.
Do you guys know when you're consolidating a lot of the information, from these studies with pronghorn specifically, because I remember hearing someone say once that like all the pronghorn, or a lot of the pronghorn you see in the Stanley Basin between like Stanley and Sawtooth City, a lot of them wind up down here. And I mean, I've looked at a lot of those maps probably 100 times for camping and hunting seasons, and there's not a whole lot of flat spots between here and there directly. So, and when we think of pronghorn, we don't think of these mountain goat kind of critters. We think of the flatlands. So like how are they getting down to here in these winter ranges from crossing these crazy mountains?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there are some of them doing that. You know, a lot of those sawtooth pronghorn, you know, are also going to Chalice. If you drive up through Chalice in the winter, there's pronghorn everywhere. So, you know, Germania, and then basically following Highway 75, like that moves a lot of them. There's this group of pronghorn on top of Galena. And some of the ones,
of Galena?
Yeah, that like summer up there, you know, you'll drive the pass sometimes. And if you don't feel the need to look too closely at the road, you can look up there and see them.
Weird sight.
Yeah, it is weird.
Because what's Galena, like 7,000 feet?
It's a little higher than that even,
8?
Yeah, but if you think of Laramie, Wyoming is 7,500.
Sure.
And they're crawling. There's like ants over there.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say what they're all doing, right? Like, I wish we could put a collar on every single group and find out what they were doing. I'd love to know if those Galena. I think the Galena pronghorn are going over and hitting Germania. And I say that like I think I've talked to people who hunt them and like have their theories, and they know way more than I do, you know, getting out on the ground up there and seeing it. But, you know, one of our technicians picked up a lion-killed pronghorn on the trail up Germania, just, you know, a narrow little mountain trail with thick trees. And, you know, we've caught them on some of our trail cameras in places you would not expect a pronghorn, you know, over in the the Lost River Range. One of our biologists was flying a bighorn sheep survey and saw a buck pronghorn like up above the rock line. So they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And we don't give them enough credit sometimes.
Yeah.
I was going to say I like them less after listening to you talk.
should like them more.
I don't understand that.
They're hard. I mean, they are, you know, we've got some biologists who have done a lot of, you know, Brett Panning did his grad work on pronghorn, and you know, he's said like they're just the forgotten child of the ungulate world. Like we don't pay much attention to pronghorn. And you know, pronghorn hunting compared to mule deer and elk in Idaho, it's just not at the same popularity level. But I think there's changes coming. You know, we've got, I shouldn't say changes coming, but I think that mentality is like kind of shifting. Like we could maybe get creative with some of our pronghorn management based on some of this new data that's coming out. And so I think our population staff and our moose, sheep, and goat and pronghorn coordinators like looking at those things.
I'm curious, Sierra, because you're a biologist, you have to stay neutral as a scientist. Are there any, like I guess like migratory narratives that you're personally curious about Idaho? Like the pronghorn example, for instance, like how does that animal get from here to here? Are there other ones that haven't really been scratched yet that you're personally curious about, like a certain population or a portion of animals in one part of the state that somehow magically wind up way over here?
Yeah, man, I'm going to have to give that, like, now I know what I'm doing for the rest of the day, is to maybe go look at some of those holes. Working as a regional biologist in Magic Valley, Mike McDonald was, and Jake Powell, my counterpart, like I feel fortunate to have gotten to collar as much as I did while I was in that position, because, you know, Mike was very much like, well, if you got a question about a pop, let's do it. Like, let's put some collars out. And like, he found a way to get the project going. And so, you know, we've collared over 100 pronghorn in the Magic Valley. And when I started, we didn't have a single pronghorn collared. So I got the opportunity to do some of that with that team, and start to fill those blanks in. We just put some collars out in Unit 46, so down on the the inside desert in the Bruno Jarbidge area. And I was really curious about those, and that landscape looks susceptible to certain energy projects to me. And so it was like, let's try and get some data in there. And again, that was a Magic Valley decision to go ahead and do that. And they had concerns, that like, maybe we need to get ahead of this if something does get proposed. We don't know anything about the pronghorn down there. We hadn't collared mule deer in the sublets for a long time. Or black pine at all. And so I got to work with Utah to put collars on. They bought the collars. We staffed the helicopter. We went down to Utah and caught deer. And so that was kind of on both states' agendas. And that was really, really cool to work across interstate boundaries. And that's something I would really like to end up doing more of. Like we're in this really cool corner of the world where it's like there's really neat stuff going on. And like, Chell Curtis over in the Oahes in our Nampa region, she's worked with Nevada and Oregon on some stuff. And so we are doing it, but like we've got some really cool neighbors too. And we've got, like you said, they don't recognize boundaries. So, back to your original question, like what would I like to do more of? I think there are some, the Southeast could use some more potential mapping of mule deer. I think every region has like its wants, and it's just, it's really expensive. It takes a lot of time. There's shifting priorities. So you could probably go to any region in the state and be like, we really need more data here. Like we're really lacking. But it just has to fit in with the, logistics situation. Yeah.
Really quick, because I want to kind of come full circle with it and wrap up kind of the process of what it's like. What does the process look like when you have to go out and do a mortalities that's for layman speak, like a collar beeps or goes off.
Yeah.
And you guys, staff here, get an alert that there is potentially a dead animal or a collar fell off. Is that true?
Yeah. Yep.
So what then happens? You've been tracking this animal for maybe a couple years, and you get this ping. What does that process look like? Are you walking into potentially a kill site? Is it dead in the side of the road? Like, what are some of the outcomes, I guess, that happen?
Yeah, no. So, with the new technology GPS, like VHF, we used to fly a fixed wing aircraft, a fixed wing plane, and you'd kind of hone in on the point, and then you would use radio telemetry equipment to like go out, and you still had to do some searching and find it. And so you didn't always really know, like you had a general location of where it was. You could make some guesses as to what it was, like if it was in the bottom of a canyon, you're like, oh, it's a mountain lion. You shouldn't go in with those like preconceived, because, Michelle Kemner, she did a lot of the training for staff on necropsies, put together a whole booklet. And I think she had said at one point, like, you should be trying to prove yourself wrong through the whole mortality, because it does get hard. And I'm definitely not the best one out there at determining, necropsy, because it is a forensic type process almost in some cases. Now with GPS, you get the exact location really pretty dang close. And like you said, it comes to your computer. So you can look at the map. You can kind of do a little bit of e-scouting, whatever it is, to, if it's right on the side of a road, you go in and you're like, okay, like you can see fence lines on aerial imagery now. Sometimes you're like, well, maybe it's stuck in a fence. But once you get out there, it's just, we kind of have a standard process for it. If you get up and it's all cached, it's a mountain lion, right? Like you do a little bit more looking, knowing what's cool about the necropsies is like understanding predator behavior too.
Yeah.
So every predator has a little bit different of a method of killing a deer or a pronghorn or an elk. So there's different signs you look for to determine if it's a mountain lion, a wolf, a bobcat, a black bear.
What are some of those signs look like? You mentioned like a cache with mountain lions, but what are like wolves, bears?
Yeah.
Even bobcat, really?
Yeah, bobcat. I've only done one bobcat. Bobcats, I think, are kind of so. Hopefully, you got there early enough that there's still enough left to tell the story. So that's why it's important to like not wait a couple days on these mortalities, because then scavengers move in. Coyotes will just completely destroy your. You don't know if a coyote killed it or just scavenged it, you know. So you try to get in within 24 hours of it. Some of our technicians are so on it that they get in there and there's a mountain lion sitting on it. And you're like, okay, well, I know what got that one. You know, wolves are a totally different, they're not an ambush predator. So there's a lot of typically like the animal normally runs a long time. They get their hind end, you know, bitten and clawed at, and it takes them a while to get them down. So there's a whole trail, you know, and you can kind of follow that along. Bobcats are interesting. Typically, there's a lot of hemorrhaging around the neck because they'll get a hold of the neck and the throat area, and they basically just clamp down until they either suffocate that deer or like break the windpipe. So a mountain lion just breaks the neck. You won't have all that hemorrhaging. With a bobcat, even though it might look similar to a mountain lion, when you get up to it, you look for like bleeding at the neck. And like you can even find like bite marks and do measurements. So different species have different, you know, distances between the canines. And so you can measure that. It can take a while. Like, I think, you know, people who are really, really good at it are sometimes the ones that spend the most time there. They'll spend an hour or 2 hours, you know, on a site.
That's crazy.
I'm blown away by the data that we are able to collect.
Yeah.
In seemingly innocuous, like, yeah.
When it's like a daily snapshot of a day in the life for this deer or this elk or this mountain lion.
A pronghorn
that Ben hates.
Yeah.
You know, but it's so cool because you're seeing kind of like when you're trapping, like you're following the tracks in the snow and you can see this whole narrative that's being played out. But with this, it's like, it's GPS lines and all this other technology at play.
Yeah, it's real. Like
Yeah.
Well, and we even have, that would be a whole nother topic, but the camera collars. So Terry helped me put together a grant a couple of years ago to get some GPS camera collars that we put on pronghorn. And so
like
those
GoPros?
are exactly what they sound like. Yeah,
What?
It's like a GoPro on the camera or on the collar. So in addition to collecting the locations, it's also getting video footage. We had some mixed success with them. We learned a lot on those collars and like how we would do it differently for the next time, but they were successful enough that I think that there's a lot of value depending on what your study is looking at to think about including those. And so we got like interactions, again, it was all pronghorn, but like we wanted to look at how they interacted with these barriers, namely fences and highways. And we got some really interesting footage of like pronghorn trying to figure fence out or like successfully figuring fence out. And, you know, even things we hadn't thought about before, it was cool to see like what they're eating.
Yeah, I was going to ask like the habitat and the stuff that's on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it like validated what, you know, other studies have shown about pronghorn and like their forage behavior.
Did they ever just walk up on like a carcass of a deer or something to start gnawing on it?
That would have been crazy. Didn't have anything crazy like that happen.
Pronghorn takes down an elk.
Yeah, I don't know what the craziest thing was we had. I don't know if we got anything super crazy. We did have a couple that died and we were hoping like, oh, maybe the collar tripped on and like you're going to see a predation event or like the predator. And we didn't get anything like that. I think you certainly could, you know. Yeah. The collars didn't fall off. Yeah, we had a couple that didn't fall off. So there's still pronghorn running around with a $2,600 GoPro on them that we probably won't ever see again. And even if we do, it's probably, we won't get any footage.
I was wondering about that earlier is like when we think about trails and how, what we've been educated with, like the Oregon Trail and there's ruts. Like, is that what you're saying is there's ruts.
There's single file line.
Yeah.
In that.
Here, Terry, why don't you hop up here and kind of just provide a little backstory if that's okay.
No, so I think one of the things that we found by putting out some game cams, I'm going to use pronghorn deer, elk as an example, north of Gooding. It's interesting to watch the behavior because what these animals will do, it's single file line and it's in a historical trail that's been used for eons. So that trail is actually a depression in the landscape. So, when we talk about fidelity to migration routes and things like that, it's, you look at it on a, if you were just hiking up there, you would go, oh, there's a trail. But actually it was wildlife that made this trail, and seeing the video evidence of these, they're in a line.
Yeah. Is that something that you only see from aerial view, or is it something you can see? You can see the depressions on the ground as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's visible, right there in front of you. And the thing, we talked earlier about, the learned behavior. A lot of times it's what looks like an older cow with elk leading the way up, or, but it's interesting how that behavior, that learned behavior, imprints so dramatically that it's to the exact location.
Yeah.
Way beyond my comprehension. I can't wrap my head around it, but very interesting.
Yeah. And it's like in a whole different league than just game trails. Cause how many times have you been out in the mountains or the trees or whatever, and they just kind of, crisscross. Webs. Yeah. And they just kind of like delta out, but you're talking like a straight, basically an interstate for these ungulates.
It's I'm going to say a north-south orientation, but I think that's probably pretty typical, but it is a learned behavior that's intentional.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't at times think we give wildlife enough credit as to learned behaviors. It's wildlife. What do they know?
Yeah, they're just out there trying to not die.
We're the smartest animals out on the landscape. No, wildlife's pretty amazing at times.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about ungulates, but I guess I had one question of, do we see this, or do you and your staff monitor predators as well the same way? Predator migration, or do they not necessarily migrate?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Connor. So, Katie Ulrich, as our, while she was in her previous role, had put quite a few collars out on elk and wolves. And of course, those two things have to go together, right? She put collars out on wolves and was collaring mountain lions. They can make some truly impressive movements. And I think they're maybe a little bit different in that, wolves, I think they all follow their prey, right? Okay. Like
pursuit of food.
Yeah. Yep. When we fly winter surveys, it's not uncommon to see mountain lions. Like if you see a mountain lion, you're like, well, there must be deer around here somewhere, they're doing a little bit the same thing. I don't know that they're undertaking these huge, I don't know that they're undertaking these like very precise movements that some of our ungulates are taking. I think they're more wanderers, the coursing predator behavior of a wolf, where they run ridge lines and smell down both sides, and the lions are very much more of an ambush predator. But there is movement. There are research projects going on and have been, like I think Morris Hornacher did one of the first studies on mountain lions in the Frank Church and, looked at some of that stuff. So along with all the other migration studies, it's like fascinated people forever, and we'll continue to try to chase it. But I do think the predator mapping portion is definitely less than what we've accomplished for the ungulates.
Mm-hmm. Sierra, what's been the longest day you've ever had aside from today?
You just turned on my Siri.
Oh.
There's too many ears.
There's a lot of ears.
Terry's, Bieri's, Sierra's.
That's funny. She's listening.
Say it again.
It's always creepy when the phone's listening to you. Longest day, I think one of my jobs in particular, I guess I just had a lot of really long days and they were all really good. It was just the nature of the job. Like, I was doing sage grouse work in Wyoming, outside of Saratoga. I was working for a grad student who, in typical grad student fashion, was looking at like everything there was to look at. It was a huge project. She was doing lek attendance, nest site selection, brood survival. And so the overlap of all those things, like there were times where we would be trapping sage grouse. You'd leave the house at 7 to drive 3 hours to where you were trapping, and you'd trap from 10 at night till 2 in the morning. And then you'd sleep in the truck for a little bit, and then you would hike out to your lek. We had blinds at the leks at 4 in the morning, and then you'd watch these birds strut around and hope that a pronghorn came through and chased them away by 8 o'clock so you could go sleep a little more.
Those dang pronghorns.
Telling
God.
Yeah, you'd see pronghorn come, please chase them away. But, then we do lek attendance. So your days were 16, 17 hours for periods of the year, sometimes longer, like then when you really had the overlap, then you'd be doing nest site. You could be trapping birds, doing leks, and also doing nest site surveys. So that was like where then after you were done with your lek, you would go and you would do some vegetation transects and stuff at the nest site. And then later in the year when they had hatched, you were back to night work. That was super fun. So it was telemetry. We'd have collared these sage grouse hens, and it was all VHF. So you had to go listen, and you were trying to spotlight the brood to see how many chicks were surviving over time. And so you'd be running around in the desert in southern Wyoming, in the dark, like with this telemetry, and they would shut off at 2 in the morning. So you'd have these list of birds that you needed to get to, and you'd be like running to the last one. Like, I just have to get this last one before the thing shuts off. And then you'd count the brood. So those made for, that was long just because there was so much in that project. I think everyone's had really long, unexpectedly long days. I don't go out with our game wardens anymore without like a overnight bag because I've ended up with herd before where it's
sardines
like,
and oysters. We've heard her.
just constant. I mean, we were headed home at 8 and then he gets a call from got a call at 8 o'clock at night. And I think we were out until 2 that morning. So yeah, our game wardens certainly, they're all over the place. So they have some super long days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got anything else, Bieri?
No.
Burning beer desire?
Like my there's been a lot to this one. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to comprehend. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that I don't believe the public takes into consideration. The work that our biologists are doing on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, and how it benefits us as a community.
Well, because there's so much to it.
There's a lot to it that, again, we see dead animals along the road as we're driving and whatever, and we don't give much thought to it of what maybe caused that animal to, and frankly, the generations that it's taken, like, I don't know, my mind's just kind of spinning a little bit about migration and all the things that are interconnected.
Yeah.
Well, and Sierra points out too, there's everything she mentioned, there's this whole world that's happening right under our noses that we're not really thinking about. It's so far out of our periphery that there's these animals going from Haley to Buell or wherever. I don't know. I'm just looking at 2 points on the map, but we're going about our day again, seeing dead wildlife or wildlife that's not dead. And so, yeah, it's something that it takes a lot of time to calculate these things. Cause you think about they're migrating twice a year.
Yep.
And so you only get 2 cracks at it a year to understand 1 year's worth of data and multiply that times however many years you're going to keep doing this. And that's just to hopefully get a kind of a picture of what they're doing.
Yeah.
It takes a lot.
And also bigger picture too. How does this affect the hunter? Well, it helps with numbers. It helps us understand where they are, when they're going to be there. The protection and preservation of that we've been trusted. This is all part of it. It's fascinating. Fascinating.
Sarah, is there anything that you have burning in your mind that you want to get out there? Is there anything that you don't reckon
you've been mandated to tell us?
I don't think so. We covered a lot.
Terry's sitting with his arms crossed.
He is. He's like,
Yeah,
you didn't
Terry.
say anything about this, and this.
Or is there anything that
think
you
so.
think maybe the general public or sportsmen and women don't know about something that you're working on, or something that we do, or anything like that?
I guess I just always try to encourage them, like be an active participant to whatever extent you can be. I know everyone's really busy. But we have volunteer opportunities. You can actually get out on the ground and we've got really good volunteers already. So if you want to be part of that, we do shrub plantings, we're doing fence pulls. There's chances if you're really interested in a particular part of habitat, we can probably get you out, like collecting sagebrush seed or whatever. So
were you a part of the paddock fire planting that Grace and Michael Young were a part of a couple months ago?
Yeah, I was. So I went out and planted, I guess not the paddock. I went to the Valley Fire.
Okay.
And planted with Ann Mosier.
Will Bales, our videographer, put together that really, really cool video with Grace and Michael. It's been on our YouTube channel, I think, for about a week now.
Yeah.
But they said, the outpouring of folks that wanted to come volunteer, whether they were hunters or not, or just wildlife enthusiasts that wanted to come plant sagebrush and bitterbrush, was like, I think over 100 people in like a week.
So great.
So there are plenty of opportunities, and unfortunately there's a lot of fires that have happened. So there's plenty of those opportunities to replant. But I think you hit it right on the nose. If there's people that are listening out there that want to do their part, there's still plenty of opportunity depending on when this podcast goes out. But wintertime and spring, I'm sure there will be still some opportunities.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sierra.
Thank you.